Hey, digital art, it's Mrs. Crosswhite. So we're going to go over our last assignment we're going to do with canva.com. So not our last assignment for the year, the last project we're just going to be using this program for specifically. What you're going to use this program for is to design a book cover. And we're actually going to focus on the principles of design, which is what our focus is going to be on for the last 9 weeks. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be making a book cover, and I'll talk the specifics about that in a moment. But you need to be thinking about 3 principles of design to create this book cover. And I'm going to go over what those principles are. So what you're going to need is, obviously, you're going to have to go to your canva.com account. You can use your cell phone, tablet, or computer, and you're going to need some inspiration. So this is where the design part comes in for your book cover. You can use a book that already exists. That's what I'm going to be doing. Now, that does not mean I can just take an image of the cover and put it on here, because that's something we're actually going to talk about, because we had a problem with that last week. So you need to be, if you're using a book that already exists, you're just redesigning the cover, you need to come up with a completely new design for it. Now, another thing you could do is you could design a cover for a book that doesn't exist. So let's say you have a favorite and you wanted to see the sequel to it. You could do like the sequel to your favorite book that doesn't exist yet. Or if you wanted to come up with your own book cover completely for your own story, that's fine as well. People have asked if they can use books such as like graphic novels, things like that. Can it be a biography? Can it be this? The answer is, if it's a book, that's all that matters. So let's move on to the principles of design, which is what you're going to have to focus on. So there are 7 principles to design, and we're going to talk about these a lot during the last 9 weeks. We use the first 3 quarters to kind of get the foundations of using a computer and Photoshop, but now we need to kind of move into the aesthetics of how you create a piece of art. So the first principle of design is balance. Balance is the distribution of weight on a piece of art, which sounds kind of funny that I say the word weight. But it means how busy is one section versus another. So if there's more text on one side or a bigger visual on the other. Balance does not mean it has to be symmetrical. It doesn't mean it has to be equal. Balance in an artwork can actually be unbalanced. So your work doesn't need to be perfectly symmetrical. It can be asymmetrical. It's up to you. So just because you use the word balance doesn't mean you're aiming for equal balance. Now, contrast is the next one. Contrast is actually going to be very important, especially when you consider text. Contrast refers to the difference between elements so you can distinguish between them. If there's a lot of contrast, you can see them very clearly against one another. If there isn't, then you don't. Now, emphasis is the next one, is creating a focal point. So what does your eye instantly go to? Does it instantly go to the title because of the style of font? Does it instantly go to a visual or a picture on the cover? That is another consideration. Pattern is exactly what we have grown up to understand what patterns are. Repetitive lines, repetitive shapes that we see consistently. This is something else you could use. Unity is a little bit tricky, but it's possible to use this. How the elements come together and work together. So do the pieces kind of fall together almost like a puzzle? Do they actually join up and create one solid design? And then the next one is movement. Movement's a little tricky for everybody, because when you're the artist, you stare at your piece the entire time. So sometimes I tell people, well, look away from your art for a little while and then come back to it and see what your eyes do. Do your eyes start in the top corner and move down? Do your eyes start in the middle and work their way out? What do they do? And then the last one is rhythm. So the repetition of elements such as lines or shapes or forms. Rhythm's going to be a little bit tricky for ours, since ours is going to have a lot of text. So rhythm might be a little bit of a hard one to focus on, but it's up to you. Now you have to focus on 3 of these. Now, that being said, when you focus on 3, you just need to think to yourself, all right, which ones do I think will fall in place really well? So I am going to be using balance, contrast, and emphasis. So those are the 3 that I'm going to be focusing on for my example. You can focus on something different. So balance, contrast, and emphasis is what I will be focusing on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take you to canva.com. So when I go here, what I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and go to create design, and it says suggested book cover. I am actually starting with a blank cover. I don't actually even want to use one of these templates, and I kind of suggest that you guys do the same. Now, once I have my file open, I actually went ahead and I Googled the cover of the book I'm using. So I'm using the book titled The Martian. This is actually the book I'm reading right now. It's a great book, and when I look at the cover, there's actually two versions of the cover, but I'm focusing on just one right now. It's pretty clear what this person has done. The focal point is the center. There is a lot of contrast between the warm colors and the white text, things like that. I want to make this very clear. I can look at this and kind of try to get some ideas, and of course I need to get the spelling of the author and the title correct, but you are not reusing the elements from this design. That's plagiarism. We're not doing that. We've had a little problem with that with the CD covers. You have to come up with a brand new cover. Now, that's not to say mine isn't going to say The Martian. It's obviously going to have the same title. So I looked at it to kind of get an idea and be like, all right, well, what does it look like now? What do I like about it? What do I not like? So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So this is the cover, and I've already looked at some photographs that I want to use. So I wanted mine to use a very dark background with stars. And the reason is because the main character actually gets stranded on Mars. He becomes the only person on the planet, and he gets stranded on there for over a year. He gets actually left behind by his crewmates by accident. So I'm going to be using this. And the reason I'm using this is because I want there to be like this idea of just vast emptiness. Now, as I keep going, there were a couple other images that I'm bringing in, such as an image of Mars. And for right now, when I use balance, I'm actually thinking about keeping it pretty symmetrical. Remember, you don't have to do that. And then the next part is going to be for text. Now, when I do this is a pretty serious book. It's about somebody who gets stranded on outer space. So something, curvy and cutesy, probably not the greatest idea. Now, there's different fonts I can use. So I'm going to go ahead and start working with some of those. And I know this looks kind of silly right now, but I just kind of like that font and I want to see what it looks like. So I can experiment and see kind of what I'm getting. Now, some people have asked how to zoom in. In the bottom right-hand corner, it actually has an option to zoom in. So you can zoom in and out as much as you need to. And again, that text is black. That's why I can't see it. So I'm going to go back and change it to white. And I'm going to fit this to my screen so I can see it just a little bit better. Now, I can position the text in different ways. I can look at how the balance is affected by the font I've picked. And I actually really don't think that's going to work. I wanted it to, but of course, that doesn't mean it's going to. So I can look at some different fonts as well. And I'm actually going to go ahead and keep the there. And I'm going to try something different this time. And again, sometimes it does help to zoom in a little bit. Now, this black text isn't going to work with my idea of contrast because it's against a black background. So I'm going to have to fix that color. For now, I'm just going to stick with the white. Now I can look at some of the different fonts I have available. So I go over here and see what is kind of going to work, what I think might not work. And I actually enjoyed this one a little bit more. Even though the font is different for the two words, it actually works pretty well. Now, this is a start for my cover. There are other things I can do. I can add certain elements such as shapes, things like that as well. Even something as simple as lines to break up the space a little bit. And I'm actually going to try duplicating this to make a top and bottom. Now, if you look in this program does a lot of work for you because it's brought up these purple lines to show that it is now centered and equal to the top and to the image in the center. There we go. Now, there is one thing you have to remember, please don't forget, and that is the author's name. Now, let's say you are making your own book, like you came up with the book yourself. You can just put your own name, that is perfectly fine. But again, if it's a book that does exist, or if it's based off of, if it's a sequel to a book that might exist, then you need to give credit to the actual author. Now, here's what we're going to mention one last time as far as consistency with credit in design. So obviously this book cover is based off of a book that already exists, and which is fine. But what we can't be doing is we can't be taking an image such as this one, because I could easily just copy this and place it into this design. I'm going to be looking up the titles of the books just like I did with the CD covers. Make sure you are coming up with your own design for your book cover. It cannot be taken from the current design. It has to be a fresh, brand new design. So please remember that. Now, last thing we're going to do is this. Let's say my cover is done. I'm happy with the elements I've selected. So, for example, I focused on balance, contrast, and emphasis. I know when I look at this, the emphasis, the focal point is the planet. The contrast I see in the text against the background. And then the balance, I feel like I've attained by actually having a symmetrical design. Now, remember, balance can be asymmetrical, so it doesn't have to be symmetrical. It's just a preference. So I've focused on those three elements. Those were the three that I picked. You can pick different ones as well. When you go to download, the standard is the PDF standard. I would prefer you to just go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and download it. It's going to prepare the design, and it's right there. It's titled something different, but that's okay. And you're going to be handing it in to the book cover design assignment. All right. If you guys have any questions, make sure you let me know. Have a good week, guys.